welcome to another episode of Legends in 20 Tech Sales Power Session, a series where we bring you the stories, strategies, and mindset of legendary GTM leaders who have built markets and shaped careers across Asia. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Madanjit Singh, currently leading go-to-market for APJ at Observe.AI, a SentinelOne company transforming observability with AI-driven data intelligence. Madanjit's journey spans over 2 decades, from building challenger brands at SAP Concur and scaled agile to mentoring founders at high-tech growth startups, and now helping enterprise teams harness AI for security and DevOps. Known for his guts, gumption, and generous humor, he has built diverse, high-performing teams across Asia, combining neuroscience, behavioral change, and business strategy into his leadership DNA. So, Madanjit, welcome to Legends in 20. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you very much, Kai, and wishing you and your family and all your listeners and many, many listeners a very happy Diwali. It's a great time to restart and to refresh yourself.
Thank you, Madanjit. Now, starting off straight into the history and diving into your career, let's start at the very beginning. You have had an incredible career spanning HP, Concur, and now Observe.AI. What was that defining spark that pulled you into the world of tech and go-to-market?
Okay, so I think I started off many, many years back. And one of the things I wanted to say is that for people like me who started way back, most of the early years are really not relevant in the sense. One has to be a little brutally honest. So maybe the last couple of years are more relevant to the fast-changing pace of technology, whether it is areas of cyber, agile, cloud, or transformation into cloud solutions, etc. So I think the spark is essentially a desire to be able to see what's coming out next, and is also always fueled by a helping hand by somebody in my network. So I will talk a little bit more later on.
All right. Moving forward from there, one of the things I admire about you is you have been always spearheading regional growth for organizations throughout at least the last 10 years. So, number one, you have repeatedly taken on challenges of scaling lesser known or emerging brands among industry giants. What's your playbook to take an underdog to a market contender?
Okay, so I always look at 3 things. One is that the product must be in the home country very solid. For example, Concur, when I took over, or with Scaled Agile, all of them had many, many thousands of customers in their home country. The second point, which is very important, is customer experience. So those customers must have a very good customer experience. And the third one is they should have a lesser or no presence here in Asia Pacific. So that kind of gives me an understanding that they are here for good. They will take the time to be able to build the markets, etc. So I choose, or I reach out to people who fulfill these 3 criteria: strong product, excellent customer experience in their home country, and limited footprint in Asia Pacific.
Which pretty much summarizes as the go-to person who has ability to take on, the Series B or the Series C with proven product market fit into something more regionally.
Right? I agree. Because once it kind of, so this whole energy about doing things right from the start, whether it is product market fit, pricing, partnership, go-to-market, I really enjoy that.
Now, one of the nicer aspects is about your guts, your gumption, and growth, right? You're well known in the industry for this. Can you unpack what those 3 traits mean in practice, especially for sellers in tough, high-pressure environments today?
Sure. It's a tough market to be outselling in the sense. Budgets are down, a lot of buzz around AI, people are being very, very demanding, etc. So thereby this whole idea about gut and gumption, and I will explain the growth one. So for example, the guts is not really kind of being out there. It's essentially to be able to motivate yourself on a day basis. So it's more around your personal guts or grit in the sense. So it's more inward looking in the sense. The gumption also is the ability to be able to to not second guess yourself. I'm a great believer in the power of self. So it's not about trying to convince you, Kai or somebody else. It's about convince yourself, right? So that's where the gut and gumption comes from.
And the humor, the third one.
Yes, the humor is very important because it kind of, even in the tough situations I've seen on negotiation, it kind of dispels stress in the sense that really. So gut, gumption, and humor are what I have kind of called out even on my LinkedIn. Thank you very much. But excuse me for picking it up.
All right, that's good insight. Now, something that really intrigued me when I researched more about you, Madanjit, to have you here in the podcast is you actually have a background in neuroscience and behavioral change, which is rarest of rare even in the tech world out there. How have you used these principles to coach teams or even influence customer behavior?
Okay. I think it's a lesser known science. For me, essentially, sales is both an art and a science, as we have discussed even in our previous conversation. But neuroscience adds a dimension to the scientific principle, whether it is essentially framing your mind, framing your communication, establishing trust, and more importantly, is to be able to get the other person's point of view. So the old-fashioned way would be hearing or listening, and neuroscience is actually a build-up on that. So it's very important to be able to apply it. So it's more start with who you are and what are you going to be out there to do, right?
For the youngsters out there, if they are interested to deep dive into this further, where and what would you recommend them to go and start reading up on?
Okay. Now, again, the internet or AI will throw up multiple choices, but Simon Sinek view about is a good place to be. There are many others in the sense, there is the growth mindset story, there is the challenger stories, etc., methodologies. So you can pick and choose. I think it's a little bit of a experimentation of what you like. What I basically like is this whole idea about building trust. And the building trust is not it pivots on being authentic.
Okay.
So you don't have to be perfect, but you have to be for real. So when you're talking to a customer or a partner or your teammate, all they would like to know is that, is this something which I can trust Madanjit on? I can call and say, well, we discussed this and you said this. Is this something which we are still firm on? That's, I think, very important.
Authentic leadership 101
Authentic
right
leadership.
there.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's very, very important.
That's good. Now, something more about your leadership through your SAP days as well. You built teams from India to Singapore to entire ASEAN. There isn't a market in Asia you have not sold into or your team has not been led into, Madanjit. How do you adapt your leadership style across these different markets? And what should young sellers learn today to be fluent across APG?
Okay. So I think this is a very good question, Kai, in the sense all of us, because we are all people, while we might speak fluent English and we might be from different countries, we do have a cultural context to what we say.
Okay.
Right. So it's very important for you to be able to spend the time, you mean as a leader or as their manager, to be able to spend the time to be able to learn what's important to them. And that all comes through spending time. So there are many things you can do on a Zoom call, but there aren't. Some of this thing has to be done in person, having a cup of tea or a drink or a coffee together, etc., to be able to establish what is really important, right? So that's something which is very important for me to understand what makes the other person tick, right? He or she. What is important? Is it financial goals? There's nothing wrong with that. Is it essentially growth goals, right? Title, etc., success in the sense. Is it caring for family? Is it caring for other causes which you might spouse, etc.? So all of this surfaces when you have meaningful conversations in a safe zone. So you're not being judgmental, you're actually having a conversation in the sense. This has always worked for me.
I understand. But any particular market that you're very fond of, Madanjit, throughout your career, and any observation from that?
I think all markets are fantastic, really, in the sense, right? I've had the responsibility to lead from Middle East to India, Southeast Asia, Australia, China, Greater China, and Japan. In the sense, obviously, there are certain markets which are more language specific, but I would say each of them has fantastic opportunities. One of the things is very important for me personally is I try to read the history and culture of those markets. That kind of gives me that added flavor about what it is all about in the sense. And that's what I thoroughly enjoy. So thereby, all the other discussion which you've had sits on top of that particular baseline of the cultural context which I spoke about.
Understand. All right. So that's a good starting point. Know your people, know your culture, know your geography before you decide to step into it.
Correct.
Something that's again very close to my heart, right? That is coaching founders and future leaders, Madanjit. See, throughout Asia, you have advised founders across edtech, cybersecurity, and now even AI. What are the common blind spots you see in early stage GTM leaders, and how can they build sustainable growth mindset early on, but again specific to Asia?
Okay. I think again, another fantastic question in the sense. So everybody likes to do growth. So if you ask a founder what they want to do, they basically want to raise capital, right? And that is predicated on raising revenue in a sense. Nothing wrong with that. But that is actually the incomplete story. The real point is that all founders are very ambitious. That's the reason they are founders. Otherwise, they would be doing an operating exec's role. So the whole idea is that this is the whole idea about how do we really grow as a person, as a personality. And so there's a fear, and there is this whole idea about, how do we not become a failure? So the whole idea is to go with the sense of open respect to what they have done so far. And I always tell them that, founders is a very lonely and a hard journey. And it's just normally the starting point, and say that, how can I help? Right? So what is your product? What do you plan to do in the solution? What do you want to do in Asia, etc.? So it starts with that very basic thing. To answer a little bit more, the founders also need to understand that there's a pathway to revenue. Everybody says, I want to land that million, $500,000 deal, $2 million deal. But do they understand that there is a pathway? Pathway should be the things which you spoke about earlier, product market fit, pricing, partnerships, right? So as GTM leaders and as somebody who has done it before, to be able to guide them and say that this is how I've done it and it's worked for me, and what do you think about it in this? And that's the way the journey starts. But then there's a whole idea about runway. That means how much time they have got. If they kind of try to compress it, it's really very hard, and it's really being very impractical in the sense. So I always, tell the founders that it has to be a little bit longer path. It's for you to be able to have more predictable and sustainable business rather than revenue growth at practically like people say, at any cost. Do whatever it takes.
Now, coming back to the buzzword today across GTM, right? AI. How do you see AI reshaping the traditional go-to-market models, and what skills will define the next generation of sellers in this AI-powered era?
I think AI is for real. For a lot of people who are still fence-sitting among listeners and saying, will this work? Is it a fad? No, it's not fad. It is for real. All AI investment is actually looking for outcomes at a business enterprise level. But please do remember that enterprise value is where AI will determine actually, rather than it is just a kind of a nice to have. I think AI is going to be the best friend of salesperson. Whether it is essentially trying to look at a better way to outreach, improve your quality of outreach, be very mindful that whatever AI does it, not to do a cut and paste, but to be able to be mindful to see what it is. But it's got some great ideas because its ability to search across multiple sources is actually incredible. We are going to see things more and more interesting. And I'm sure after this podcast, we will get talking. There will be many other things which you can share with me.
Sure.